Spartan soldiers had plumes on their helmets. 300 graphic novelist Frank Miller explained this by saying, "Another liberty I took was they all had plumes, but I only gave a plume to Leonidas to make him stand out and identify him as their king." Plumes were the red bands of horsehair that were affixed to the top of the helmets. Their real function was to make the warrior appear taller and more intimidating, while giving him a royal-like appearance. Plumes had very little practical function beyond that. Question: in what year did the Battle of Thermopylae take place? Historians who study the 300 Spartans' history are positive that the battle took place in 480 BC. They only argue over whether it happened in August or mid-September of that year. Question: were the Spartans really good guys? The Spartans were not as good as the movie portrays them to be. Greeks, including the Spartans, conquered neighboring areas to acquire more land and to build their slave labor force. Many of the Greek soldiers who fought with the Spartan elite at the Battle of Thermopylae were forced to fight because they were slaves. Frank Miller, author of the graphic novel 300, group, loving mentorship, military training, hunting, dance, and social preparation. The literal translation of Akagi is raising. The boys lived in groups under an older boy leader. They would put their loyalty to their group above their family. Even after they were married, they would not eat dinner with their wives until they were 25. Formal Akagi training ended at age 18. Sons of the king were the only males exempt from the Akagi. Question: was Leonidas' rite of passage really to kill a wolf in the woods? No. A Spartan boy's rite of passage was not to kill a wolf. It was to sneak out and murder a slave, helot. If you were discovered, then you would be punished severely, not for taking the life of another human being, but rather for getting caught. Murdering a slave was meant to train you in the art of evasion. Question: did Sparta go up against the Persians alone? No. Perhaps the biggest problem with the movie 300 is that the film leaves the audience believing that the Spartans were the only Greek force to lead an attack against the Persians. The movie leaves out the decisive amphibious battle that took place in the straits adjacent to Thermopylae, where allied Greek fleets led by Athens held off the Persian fleets. Soon after, this Athenian-led fleet saved Greece by destroying the Persian fleet during the Battle of Salamis, which marked the turning point in the war. Sparta and Athens working together also marked the beginning of Greece as a unified nation, instead of as a collection of warring city-states. Prior to these battles, it was originally the Athenians who had asked Leonidas to help them defend against the Persians. Question: was the Persian king Xerxes really bald and 9 feet tall? No, the real Persian king Xerxes had a beard and was much shorter. He never went to the front line at the Battle of Thermopylae, as his character does in the movie 300. Actor Rodrigo Santoro portrays the 9-foot-tall Xerxes in the film. Rodrigo, who also stars in ABC's Lost, is around 6 feet 2. His height and voice were both altered for the role of the Persian king. Director Zack Snyder talked about Xerxes' exaggerated features in an interview. Because we scaled him as we did, when his normal voice was played, it was even stranger to me. He was out of scale of his voice. Not that it wasn't commanding. The actor's actual voice is heard in the film, only with the pitch scaled down. Question: did Leonidas really consult an oracle to aid in his decision to go to battle? Yes, King Leonidas consulted the oracle at Delphi. Similar to the movie, the oracle was located in a temple that had been erected over a small chasm. The oracle was a woman considered to possess a certain prophetic wisdom, often spiritual in nature. She was consulted prior to all major undertakings such as wars, the founding of colonies, etc. She would usually babble something almost incoherent, and the elders, priests, would take her word. Like in the movie, she advised the Spartans that a king's death would save Greece. Some historians believe that this is why King Leonidas decided to stay and fight until death at the Battle of Thermopylae instead of falling back to regroup. Question: did the Persians really use charging elephants and rhinos at Thermopylae? No, the Persians didn't bring any charging elephants or rhinos Spartans who helped Xerxes, they felt these most likely became a traitor out of fear or hope of reward. In the movie, we hear the deep voice of Xerxes promise him women and wealth. Question: are the Immortals based on a real Persian fighting unit? Yes, the Immortals were Xerxes' personal bodyguards. They were an elite fighting unit. In the film, they wear shiny masks to hide their horrific faces, which is an element of fiction created by 300 author Frank Miller. In reality, the Immortals wrapped their faces in cloth